A blank wall can grow lettuce, herbs, radishes, beets and strawberries without taking one more inch of your balcony floor. But if you fill every pocket at random, the plants at the top may dry out while the plants below remain wet, crowded and shaded. The secret is not buying the largest wall planter you can find. The secret is matching each crop to the amount of soil, moisture, light and growing room that a vertical system can actually provide. By the end of this video, you will have 15 edible crops to choose from. But more importantly, you will know why each one belongs in a particular part of the wall. Some are useful because they stay low. Some are valuable because you can harvest only a few leaves at a time. Others need a deeper gutter, even though the plant above the soil looks small. And the final crops use the open air beyond the edge of the planter, creating color and fresh fruit without occupying the space needed by the greens behind them. Before we plant anything, picture the finished wall. Soft lettuce leaves fill the middle rows. Green onions and chives rise in narrow clumps. Parsley and cilantro sit where they are easy to reach. Radishes and young beets use the deeper sections. Strawberries trail over the edges, leaving the floor below open for walking, sitting, or simply enjoying the balcony. It looks abundant, but abundance in a vertical garden does not come from squeezing in the greatest number of plants. It comes from giving every plant enough room to remain healthy after it has grown beyond the size of a seedling. And one of the plants that looks smallest above the soil may need more room below it than several leafy greens combined. We will reach that plant later. First, we need to understand the wall itself, because two pockets only a few feet apart can behave like two completely different containers once sun, wind, heat, and drainage begin to interact. Start by watching the light. Do not look at the wall only once in the morning and assume you understand it. Notice which areas receive direct sun, which areas become shaded by a roof or railing, and which sections are exposed to reflected heat from brick, concrete, glass, or metal. A wall that feels comfortable in early spring may become much warmer in summer. A row that receives gentle morning light may be easier for tender greens than a row that bakes in strong afternoon sun. The correct layout begins with the real conditions on your wall, not with a universal diagram. Next, think about weight. Dry potting mix may feel light when you install the system, but after watering, every pocket and gutter becomes heavier. Add mature plants, wet foliage, and the force of wind, and the load increases again. Use hardware and supports suited to the wall, fence, or freestanding frame you actually have. If the surface cannot safely carry the system, choose a freestanding vertical rack, rather than forcing heavy containers onto an unsuitable wall. A productive garden is never worth creating an unsafe structure. The containers matter too. Use planters intended for outdoor gardening and suitable for growing edible plants. Do not reuse a container that once held chemicals, fuel, paint, or an unknown substance. If you are using gutters or troughs, make sure the material can tolerate sunlight, moisture, and repeated temperature changes. Protect the wall behind the planters when necessary, because a constant film of moisture can stain surfaces, encourage unwanted growth, or damage finishes over time. Then inspect the drainage. Every pocket needs a clear path for excess water to leave. Every gutter needs enough outlets that water cannot collect in one end. But drainage is not only about preventing soggy soil, you also need to know where the water goes next. If the upper row empties directly into the leaves of the row below, soil and splashing water can dirty edible foliage. If every row drains onto the same lower planter, that lower container may remain wet long after the top has begun to dry. A vertical garden should move water out of the root zone without turning the bottom row into a collection basin. Before planting, water the empty system once. Watch which sections drain quickly, which ones hold water, and whether the flow is even from one end of a gutter to the other. This simple test can reveal a blocked outlet, a low spot, or a row that pours too much water onto the plants below. Fix those problems before roots occupy the container. It is much easier to adjust an empty planter than a wall full of mature crops. Now consider the growing mix. Small containers need a mix that can hold useful moisture while still allowing air to reach the roots. Heavy garden soil often compacts in pockets and gutters, especially after repeated watering. Compacted soil drains poorly, limits oxygen, and makes root crops struggle to expand. Use a quality potting mix made for containers and fill the planter without pressing it into a hard block. Water it, allow it to settle naturally, and add more mix if the level drops. Do not create firmness by crushing out the air the roots need. Finally, separate your containers by usable depth. Shallow pockets are best reserved for crops you plan to keep compact, such as many cut and come-again greens and smaller herbs. Medium pockets can support plants with a larger crown or a fuller root system. Deeper gutters or larger modules should be saved for crops that form an edible root, need more stable moisture, or remain in place for a longer time. This single decision prevents one of the most common mistakes in vertical gardening: treating every opening as if it offers the same amount of soil. Once the wall is safe, accessible, and able to drain, we can begin with the plants that create the fastest green transformation. The first is leaf lettuce, and the word leaf is important. Head-forming lettuce often needs more space and a more uniform growing environment than a small pocket can comfortably provide. Loose leaf types are usually more adaptable because you can harvest the outer leaves while leaving the center to continue growing when the plant is healthy and conditions remain favorable. Lettuce works well as a foundation crop because it quickly makes a sparse wall look alive. Its soft leaves fill visual gaps, and a few freshly harvested leaves are useful in sandwiches, wraps, and salads. But lettuce is not a plant you can simply pack into every pocket and forget. In a small volume of soil, the roots have less protection from rapid drying. If the mix becomes repeatedly dry, leaves may wilt, become tougher, or develop damaged edges. If the pocket stays constantly wet, the roots lose air, and the base of the plant may decline. Give lettuce enough spacing for air to move between the leaves. A tightly planted wall may look impressive on the first day, but dense foliage traps moisture and makes it harder to notice damaged leaves or pests. Harvest from the outside, remove leaves that touch wet soil, and keep the center of the plant unobstructed. In warm conditions, a middle or lower position, with some protection from intense afternoon heat, may be easier to manage, but observe your own wall. A lower row that receives runoff and no airflow may be worse than a brighter row above. Lettuce may be the obvious first choice, but the second crop adds something lettuce cannot: a stronger flavor from a very small planting space. Arugula brings a peppery taste that can change an entire salad, even when you harvest only a handful. That makes it valuable in a wall garden, where every pocket needs to justify the soil and attention it receives. Arugula can be harvested young, and regular picking can help keep the planting useful. But warm weather often pushes it toward flowering, and the flavor may become stronger as the plant matures. This is not necessarily a failure. Flowers and mature leaves tell you the crop is moving into another stage. You can remove plants that have passed the quality you want and replant when local conditions are more suitable. A vertical garden becomes more productive when you accept rotation, rather than expecting every crop to remain at its best all year. Because arugula leaves are narrower than lettuce, it is tempting to sow too densely. Resist that temptation. Crowding increases competition for water and reduces airflow. Thin the planting so the remaining plants have room, and use the young thinnings if they are clean and suitable to eat. Place arugula where you can reach it frequently, because a crop that benefits from regular harvest should not be hidden in the least accessible corner of the wall. The third green may sit beside lettuce and arugula in a salad bowl, but it often reacts very differently on a warm wall. Spinach prefers cooler conditions and relatively steady moisture. When temperatures rise, it may stop producing the tender leaves you want and begin moving toward flowering. That makes spinach an excellent indicator crop. If it struggles while lettuce and herbs still look comfortable, the wall may be becoming too warm for spinach, rather than the entire system being poorly designed. Give spinach a position where the root zone is less likely to swing from wet to dry. Depending on your climate and season, that may be a lower row, a section with morning sun, or a pocket protected from reflected afternoon heat. Do not confuse steady moisture with saturated soil. The roots still need drainage and air. Check the mix with your finger instead of watering only by the appearance of the top surface. A pocket can look dry on top and remain moist deeper inside. especially if runoff from above enters the container. Lettuce, arugula, and spinach may sit side by side in the kitchen, but placing them side by side on a hot wall can produce three very different results. That is the pattern we will follow throughout this garden. We are not merely collecting plants that fit. We are assigning each crop to the conditions it can use best. The next four greens add more texture, color, and flavor, but they also make harvest timing more important than the final size of the plant. Baby kale is the fourth crop, and the word baby describes the way we manage it. A kale plant allowed to reach full size can become too large for a shallow pocket, especially when its leaves spread over neighboring rows. But when kale is grown for young leaves and harvested regularly, it can remain much more compatible with a vertical system. The goal is not to force a large plant to behave like a miniature. The goal is to use harvest timing to keep the plant within the space the wall can provide. Choose a pocket with enough depth for a stable root system and enough room around the crown for airflow. Harvest the older outer leaves first, leaving the smaller center leaves when the plant is healthy. Do not strip the plant bare in one session. A vertical garden benefits from light. Repeated harvests because they preserve the green appearance of the wall and reduce sudden changes in shade. Remove yellowing or damaged leaves promptly, especially when they rest against wet fabric or the rim of a planter. Baby kale also teaches an important lesson about labels. A seed packet marked baby does not always mean the mature plant will stay permanently tiny. Often, it means the leaves are intended to be harvested young. Read the variety description, but also plan to manage the crop through spacing and harvest. If you leave every kale plant untouched for too long, the wall may become crowded no matter what the packet promised. The fifth crop, mizuna, changes the texture of the entire planting. Its finely divided leaves look lighter and more open than broad lettuce or kale leaves. That makes it useful both in the kitchen and in the design of the wall. A small amount adds a fresh, slightly peppery quality to salads, and the feathery foliage creates movement between heavier plants. But delicate-looking leaves can still form a wide plant. Do not assume that a narrow leaf means the crop needs no space. Give mizuna enough room to spread without pressing into the plants beside it. Harvest outer leaves while they are tender, and watch the center for new growth. If the plant begins to crowd a neighboring pocket, reduce the planting rather than allowing two crops to compete until both become weak. Mizuna is especially useful when you want variety without using a different container system. It can occupy the same general type of pocket as other leafy greens, yet it looks and tastes distinct. This is one way to make a small wall feel generous. Choose crops that provide different textures and flavors even when their basic growing needs overlap. The sixth crop, tatsoi, forms a low rosette that can look almost ornamental. Its dark leaves spread outward close to the soil, creating a rounded shape between more upright plants. That low form is useful, but it also creates a practical concern. Leaves near the surface are more likely to collect splashed soil or water from the row above. Place tatsoi where runoff does not pour directly into the center of the plant. A wider pocket or trough section is often more useful than a narrow sleeve because the rosette needs room to open. Keep mulch, loose mix, and decaying leaves away from the crown. When you water, aim for the soil rather than repeatedly wetting the entire rosette. Good airflow matters because closely layered leaves can hold moisture. Tatsoi proves that compact does not have to mean visually boring. Its shape creates a clear focal point, and the leaves can be harvested while young. Still, compact is not the same as indestructible. If the rosette is squeezed between aggressive neighbors, shaded from above, and drenched by runoff, its small size will not save it. Position remains as important as plant choice. The seventh leafy crop brings the boldest flavor in this group. Mustard greens can add heat, sharpness, and color, depending on the variety. They are valuable when you want a small harvest to have a strong effect in the kitchen, but mustard greens can also become difficult neighbors if you ignore their growth. Some types make large leaves quickly in favorable conditions, and those leaves can shade smaller crops or block access to a pocket below. Use mustard greens as an accent rather than filling every available opening. Choose a variety whose mature size matches the container, and harvest frequently enough to keep the plant within bounds. If the leaves begin leaning over lettuce or tatsoi, do not wait for the neighboring crop to weaken. Remove the largest usable leaves and restore light and airflow. A productive wall is managed through small corrections before they become large problems. This is where harvest timing becomes more important than the final size a plant could reach in the ground. Baby kale, mizuna, tatsoi, and mustard greens can all work in a vertical garden when the planter has enough soil and the crops are kept at a useful scale. Leave them untouched, and the wall gradually loses access, light, and airflow. Harvest them thoughtfully, and the same limited surface continues to provide a changing mix of leaves. The wall now has plenty of greens, but a useful kitchen garden needs more than volume. It needs ingredients that change the flavor of a meal. The smallest pockets can become surprisingly valuable when they hold crops. You use a little at a time, and the 8th plant is a perfect example. Green onions grow upright, which makes them efficient in a narrow space. Their leaves rise rather than spreading broadly over neighboring plants, and even a modest harvest can be useful in soups, eggs, noodles, salads, and cooked dishes. They fit naturally into a vertical design because their form creates height without creating a wide canopy. Give green onions a pocket or gutter section with enough depth to hold the base securely. Do not crowd so many plants together that the mix becomes a solid mass of roots. Tight planting may look productive, but every plant still needs access to moisture and air. Harvest leaves carefully, or lift whole plants when that suits your use and planting plan. If you cut leaves, allow enough green tissue to remain for the plant to recover, but do not describe regrowth as endless. Plants weaken over time, conditions change, and replacement is part of maintaining the wall. Green onions are also useful near the top or middle of the system because their upright leaves are less likely to create a heavy curtain over the row below. However, that position is only appropriate if you can keep the pocket evenly moist. An exposed upper row may dry quickly in wind. A plant with a narrow leaf can still suffer when the root zone repeatedly loses water. The 9th crop, chives, may look similar from a distance, but it behaves differently. Chives form a clump of fine leaves rather than a row of individual onion plants. A healthy clump can be harvested in small amounts, making it valuable for meals that need only a fresh onion flavor. Its narrow foliage occupies little horizontal space, and the plant can fit well between broader greens. The risk comes later, when the clump becomes dense. A crowded chive plant can fill the entire pocket with roots and old leaf bases. That makes watering less even and reduces the room available for new growth. Thin or divide an overgrown clump when needed, and remove dry leaves that collect around the base. Do not keep a declining clump simply because it once performed well. Vertical gardens remain productive through renewal. Chive flowers can add beauty, but consider the purpose of the pocket. If your main goal is leaf production, regular harvest and removal of aging growth may be more useful than allowing the clump to occupy increasing space. If you keep some flowers, make sure they do not block access to plants around them. Every decorative choice still needs to work within the limited structure. The 10th crop, parsley, deserves more room than many beginners expect. A small transplant may look as though it belongs in the tiniest pocket, but the mature crown and root system can become substantial. Parsley is valuable because a few stems add freshness to sauces, soups, salads, and finished dishes. Yet the plant needs a stable container if you want it to remain useful. Give parsley its own section rather than pressing several plants into one narrow opening. Harvest the older outer stems near the base while leaving the younger center growth. Avoid removing only the tips of many stems, because that can leave a crowded mass of cut foliage. Watch the soil closely. Parsley appreciates steady moisture, but the crown should not sit in a constantly saturated pocket. Place parsley where you can reach the outside stems without crushing the plants above or below it. A middle row often makes harvesting convenient, but choose according to the light and heat on your wall. In very warm exposure, a cooler section may protect leaf quality. In a shaded system, parsley may need one of the brighter openings. The plant does not know which row, a diagram calls ideal. It responds to the real environment. The 11th crop, cilantro, offers high value from a small harvest, but it also reminds us that a vertical wall cannot erase the seasons. Cilantro often produces the best leafy growth in cooler conditions. As temperatures rise, it may form a taller central stem and move rapidly toward flowering. When that happens, adding more fertilizer or more water will not necessarily return the plant to its earlier form. Use cilantro when local conditions favor it, and consider sowing smaller amounts in succession rather than filling a large section all at once. Place it where excessive heat is reduced, provided the area still receives useful light and airflow. Harvest leaves while their quality suits your kitchen, and be prepared to replace the crop when it changes stage. Seeds and flowers can have value, but they require different expectations than a pocket intended mainly for fresh leaves. The value of a pocket is not measured only by how much food it produces. A small supply of green onions, chives, parsley, or cilantro may influence more meals than a much larger harvest of one vegetable. That is why these plants earn their place. They make the wall useful in daily cooking, even when each harvest fits in one hand. Up to this point, nearly everything we have judged has been visible above the soil. Now we need to look at the hidden space below it. The next two crops can appear compact from the top, but the edible portion develops in the growing mix itself. This is where many attractive wall gardens begin to fail. Every pocket looks similar from the outside, yet the roots experience very different space inside. Radishes are the 12th crop, and they can work well in a gutter or deeper module when the mix is loose, the drainage is reliable, and the variety matches the available depth. They are not a good reason to assume that every shallow decorative pocket can produce a proper root. The plant needs physical space for the root to expand. If the container is too shallow or packed hard, additional feeding cannot create the missing room. Choose radish types described as compact or suitable for containers, and pay attention to root shape. A round radish generally uses space differently from a long type. Sow with enough spacing that each plant can develop instead of producing a crowded mat of leaves. When seedlings are too close, thin them early. Crowding may create impressive green growth, while the edible roots remain small or misshapen. Keep the moisture reasonably steady as the roots develop. Repeatedly drying the mix and then flooding it creates stress and inconsistent growth. At the same time, never allow water to stand in the gutter. Loose mix, open drainage, and regular observation matter more than a rigid watering schedule. The correct frequency changes with container material, weather, wind, and plant size. Radishes are also a reminder to inspect the depth after the soil settles. A gutter that looked full on planting day may lose height after several waterings. If the usable soil layer becomes too shallow, the roots have less space than you planned. Top up the mix carefully when needed, without burying the leaves or blocking the crown. The 13th crop, baby beets, requires even more respect for the hidden root zone. The word baby describes the harvest stage. It does not mean a mature beet plant naturally needs the same space as a small herb. Young beet leaves are edible, and the roots can be harvested while still small. But the plant still benefits from a deeper, wider section than most leafy greens. Use a substantial gutter or larger pocket, and avoid sowing so densely that every seedling competes for the same narrow column of mix. Beet seed clusters can produce more than one seedling, so thinning may be necessary. Keep the strongest plants at useful spacing and remove competitors before their roots become tangled. A smaller number of well-spaced plants is more useful than a crowded patch that never develops properly. The leaves also need management. Beet foliage can spread over low-growing neighbors, so place the crop where the tops have room and remain easy to reach. Harvest a limited number of young leaves if you wish, but remember that the plant still needs foliage to feed the developing root. Do not strip the top and expect the root to continue normally. The biggest mistake is treating every pocket as if it provides the same growing conditions. Radishes and baby beets expose that mistake because their results remain hidden until you inspect or harvest them. A leafy plant can show you when it is crowded. A root crop may look green above the soil while struggling in compressed space below. Design the wall for the roots you cannot see, not only for the leaves that make the first photograph look full. With the hidden space below the soil accounted for, the final two crops can use a different kind of room. The open air beyond the edge of the planter. Strawberries add color, flowers, movement, and a small fresh harvest. But the two types in this plan serve different roles. Alpine strawberries are the 14th crop. They're often more compact in growth and produce smaller fruit than the large strawberries commonly sold in stores. Their value in a vertical garden comes from the experience of finding a ripe berry among the leaves, and from the way the plants add color without requiring a broad vegetable canopy. Give alpine strawberries enough soil for stable moisture and place them where you can inspect the crown and fruit. A tiny pocket that dries within hours is not automatically suitable simply because the fruit is small. Strawberries have a shallow root system, but shallow roots still need a useful volume of evenly moist, well-drained mix. Protect the crown from being buried and remove dead leaves that trap moisture around the base. Pollination, temperature, plant health, and variety all influence fruiting. So do not judge the entire wall by the number of berries from one plant. The purpose here is diversity, not an exaggerated promise of heavy production. A few fragrant berries can still make the garden feel special, especially when they are harvested directly from a balcony wall. Trailing strawberries are the 15th crop, and their role is architectural as well as edible. Their leaves, stems, and runners can move beyond the rim of a gutter, using airspace that upright plants cannot. Placed near an edge, they soften the appearance of the structure and can partially hide the container. That same trailing habit can create problems if it is not managed. Runners may cross watering points, tangle with other plants, or shade a lower row. Fruit hanging against a wet wall or sitting in dirty runoff is more likely to be damaged. Guide the growth toward open space, remove or redirect runners when necessary, and keep fruit away from surfaces that remain damp. Do not place trailing strawberries above delicate crops without imagining the plants several months later. The leaves you see at planting time are only the beginning. Ask what the runners will cover, where the fruit will hang, and whether you will still be able to reach the pocket below. A good vertical layout plans for movement, not just for the original footprint. We now have all 15 crops, but knowing their names is only half the design. The next decision determines whether they behave like one garden or 15 containers competing for water, light, and access. Begin the layout with access. Stand in front of the wall and reach toward every row. Can you check the soil without pulling another plant aside? Can you harvest parsley without crushing lettuce? Can you remove a radish without spilling mix onto the pockets below? If the answer is no, the system is already too dense, even before the plants have matured. The upper section often receives more wind and stronger exposure, so it may dry faster. But do not turn that observation into a rule that applies to every wall. An upper gutter connected to its own irrigation line may remain more evenly moist than a lower fabric pocket. A top row beneath a roof may receive less rain than the rest of the system. The correct placement comes from checking the actual moisture and light, not from assuming height alone tells the whole story. Use upper rows for plants that will not create a heavy curtain over everything below. Green onions and chives are useful possibilities because their leaves rise vertically. Arugula or mustard greens may work there during cooler conditions if you can prevent the pocket from drying. Strawberries can use an edge, but only when their runners have a clear direction to travel. Whatever you choose, make sure the row remains reachable. A crop that needs frequent harvest should not be placed where every visit requires a ladder or an awkward stretch. The middle section is often the easiest place to work, making it valuable for crops you harvest regularly. Leaf lettuce, baby kale, mizuna, tatsoi, parsley, and other frequently picked greens can fit here when the light is suitable. Keep enough vertical distance between gutters for the leaves to expand. A young lettuce plant may sit comfortably beneath a row today, then press against it after growth. Space for mature foliage is not wasted space. It is the room that keeps the leaves dry, visible, and harvestable. Use the middle rows to create a pattern rather than a solid block of one crop. Broad lettuce beside narrow chives, feathery mizuna beside rounded tatsoi, and upright parsley beside a trailing edge create contrast while also reducing direct competition between identical shapes. Repetition can make the wall attractive, but too much repetition creates one shared weakness. A whole row of spinach may decline together when heat arrives, while a mixed row can continue to provide other crops. The lower section may be cooler or more shaded, and it may hold moisture longer, especially when runoff reaches it. That can help spinach or cilantro during warm periods, but only if airflow remains good and the mix does not stay saturated. Lower is not automatically safer. A dark, wet pocket beneath dense foliage can become one of the hardest places to maintain. Inspect it closely after watering and remove leaves that touch the floor or collect splashed soil. Deeper lower gutters are useful for radishes and baby beets because the extra soil volume supports their roots and the weight is carried closer to the base of the structure. Keeping heavier containers lower can also simplify support, although the entire frame still needs to be designed safely. These crops should remain accessible from above, so you can thin seedlings, inspect the shoulders of developing roots, and harvest without disturbing the rest of the wall. A lower edge can also hold strawberries when the fruit will remain clean and the plants still receive enough light. This position prevents runners from covering several rows beneath them, but it may expose the fruit to splashing from the floor. The best location balances light, cleanliness, airflow, and access. No single row is perfect in every system. Now think about water as a path through the wall. When you irrigate the top, does water leave the container and fall directly into the next row? Does it run down the back of the wall? Does one end of a gutter receive more than the other? Watch the system during watering rather than walking away as soon as the hose is turned on. The pattern you see will help you decide whether to water each row separately, reduce the flow to the upper planters, or add a controlled drip line. Do not assume that runoff from above is enough to water the plants below. The first container may absorb most of the moisture, leaving only a quick splash for the next one. Or the opposite may happen. The upper pocket drains rapidly and repeatedly saturates the lower gutter. Check the growing mix itself. Press a finger into the soil at several depths where possible and learn how the container feels when it is adequately moist. The wall will tell you what it needs, but only if you inspect each level instead of treating the structure as one oversized pot. Wind changes the calculation. A balcony corner can funnel air across the upper leaves and dry fabric pockets quickly. Hot, dry weather increases water loss. Cloudy, cool conditions reduce it. Larger plants use more water than newly planted seedlings. That means a schedule that worked at the beginning of the season may become inadequate later. Water, according to observed need, and continue checking drainage so increased watering does not create standing water. One of the smartest choices is to leave a few pockets empty at the beginning. An empty space gives leaves room to grow, but it also gives you flexibility. After several weeks of observation, you may discover that one row remains cooler, another dries faster, and a corner receives less light than expected. You can then fill the remaining pockets with crops suited to those conditions instead of rebuilding the wall after every space has been occupied. Leaving space also makes pest and disease inspection easier. Plants placed close together can hide damaged leaves, insects, or early discoloration. On a vertical wall, a problem can move from one pocket to the next through touching foliage or splashing water. Check the undersides of leaves, remove severely damaged material, and keep the area around the wall clean. Use management methods appropriate to the pest and crop rather than applying treatments without identifying the problem. Airflow is not an invisible luxury. It affects how quickly leaves dry after watering and how easily you can notice changes. Leave room between broad plants. Trim leaves that block entire pockets. Redirect strawberry runners. Divide overgrown chives. Replace a declining plant instead of allowing it to become a wet mass in the center of the wall. Small maintenance decisions keep the system open and understandable. Now consider feeding. Every pocket contains a limited reserve of nutrients, and repeated watering can carry nutrients out through the drainage holes. At the same time, adding too much fertilizer does not compensate for poor light, compressed roots, or an unsuitable season. Use a fertilizer labeled for edible container plants. Follow the product directions and adjust only after observing the crops. Pale leaves can have several causes, including low nutrients, excess water, damaged roots, cold, heat, or natural aging. Do not diagnose every yellow leaf as hunger. A balanced approach is more useful than trying to force rapid growth. Strong, overly lush foliage may shade neighboring pockets and require more water. Root crops given excessive nitrogen may produce abundant leaves without the root development you want. Herbs can lose their compact form when pushed too hard. The aim is steady, healthy growth that fits the system, not the largest possible plant. Potting mix also settles and decomposes over time. Check the level around the roots. Add fresh mix when needed, without burying crowns or piling soil over leaf bases. If roots have completely filled a pocket, the correct solution may be division, replacement, or moving the plant to a larger container. Fertilizer cannot create physical space inside a root-bound planter. Harvest is part of maintenance, not merely the reward at the end. Pick outer lettuce leaves before they become old and damaged. Take baby kale leaves while the plant remains manageable. Cut small amounts of chives and green onion leaves for the kitchen. Remove parsley stems from the outside. Harvest mizuna, tatsoi, arugula, and mustard greens at the size and flavor you prefer. Each harvest opens light and air for the growth that remains. But do not remove more than a plant can support. A severely stripped plant has less leaf area to continue growing. This matters especially in a small container, where the root system already has limited resources. Take modest harvests, observe the response, and allow recovery. If a crop has reached the end of its useful stage, replace it instead of repeatedly cutting a weak plant and expecting it to return to peak condition. Radishes and baby beets follow a different rhythm. They occupy valuable deeper soil until the root is ready for the harvest size you want. Once removed, the space becomes available for another planting. Loosen the surface, restore the mix if needed, and consider whether local conditions still suit the same crop. A wall that changes with the seasons will remain more useful than one forced to preserve the exact original arrangement. Spinach and cilantro make this lesson especially clear. Both can be excellent crops when conditions suit them, yet neither should be treated as a permanent decoration. When heat changes their growth, move to another crop that handles the season better. When cooler conditions return, reintroduce them. The edible wall is a rotating kitchen garden, not a framed picture that must remain unchanged. Strawberries stay in place longer than many leafy greens, so inspect them carefully. Remove dead foliage, keep crowns open, and manage runners according to the space available. If a runner is allowed to root in another pocket, remember that it creates another plant competing for water and nutrients. If you do not want that new plant, redirect or remove the runner before the system becomes tangled. Also watch where fruit rests. A berry to soil, a damp wall, or dirty runoff can spoil before you notice it. Guide fruit toward clean, open air and harvest when it reaches the appropriate ripeness for the variety. Small harvests are still meaningful. A vertical garden does not need to replace a farm or a large backyard bed. Its strength is keeping a range of fresh ingredients close to the kitchen in a space that might otherwise remain unused. As the season progresses, look at the whole wall from several feet away. Are the upper plants shading everything below? Has one mustard green become the dominant feature? Are the chives too dense? Is a parsley plant blocking access to the radish gutter? The wide view reveals layout problems that are easy to miss when you focus on one leaf at a time. Then move close and inspect the details. Check the moisture in each level. Look for roots exposed by settling mix. Confirm that drainage openings remain clear. Remove fallen leaves from gutters. Watch for insects and signs of stress. Make corrections while they are small. Vertical systems respond quickly because the containers are small, and that can be an advantage when you pay attention. You see changes early and can adjust before the entire wall declines. There is one final reason not to fill every pocket immediately. Your first planting teaches you more about the wall than any plan can. It shows where wind strikes, where water collects, where shade develops, and which crops you actually enjoy harvesting. Use that information. A successful edible wall is designed twice, once before planting and again after the plants reveal how the space truly behaves. Now return to the blank wall we imagined at the beginning. It is no longer an unused surface. Leaf lettuce creates the soft base for salads and sandwiches. Arugula and mustard greens add stronger flavor. Spinach offers tender leaves when the season and position remain cool enough. Baby kale, mizuna, and tatsoi bring different shapes, textures, and harvest options. Green onions and chives rise between the broader leaves, using narrow spaces efficiently. Parsley and cilantro provide ingredients that can change a meal even when the harvest is small. Radishes and baby beets use the deeper sections, reminding us that the invisible root zone matters as much as the visible foliage. Alpine strawberries add small bursts of color and fruit. Trailing strawberries extend beyond the planter edge, using open air while softening the structure. Together, these 15 crops do more than cover a wall with green. They create layers of use. Some provide leaves often, some provide flavor in small amounts. Some occupy the deeper soil for a single root harvest. Some remain longer and reward careful maintenance with flowers and fruit. The wall becomes productive because the crops are different, not because every pocket produces the same thing. The most useful part of this garden may not be the amount harvested at one time. It may be the number of fresh ingredients within arm's reach. A few lettuce leaves for lunch, chives for eggs, parsley for soup, cilantro for a sauce, a radish for crunch, and a ripe strawberry, discovered beside the balcony door, can make the space feel generous without pretending it is unlimited. Remember the central lesson. A productive vertical garden is not created by filling every empty pocket. It is created by matching each crop to the soil volume, moisture, light, and position the wall can actually provide. Start with the strongest matches. Observe how each level behaves. Leave room for roots, airflow, access, and future growth. Harvest to keep the plants useful and replace crops when the season or their life cycle changes. You do not need to begin with all 15 crops. Choose 3 or 4 that fit the conditions you have now. If your wall stays cool, begin with lettuce, spinach, parsley, and cilantro. If it is brighter and easier to water, try leaf lettuce, green onions, chives, and strawberries. If you have a deep lower gutter, reserve it for radishes or baby beets. Let the wall teach you before you expand. Then add variety with purpose. Do not add a plant only because an opening is empty. Ask what that crop contributes, whether the roots fit, whether you can reach it, and what it may cover after it grows. Every pocket should earn its place by providing useful food, supporting the design, or making another part of the wall easier to manage. A blank wall is not automatically a garden, but it can become one. With secure containers, safe materials, open drainage, suitable potting mix, thoughtful crop selection, and regular observation, the unused surface begins to work. It holds salad greens, kitchen herbs, compact roots, and fresh berries while the floor remains open below. Before you buy seeds or transplants, make one simple map of your wall. Mark the brightest section, the coolest section, the deepest containers, and the places you can reach most easily. That small map will prevent you from choosing plants only by appearance. It will also make future changes easier because you will understand why each crop was placed where it is. When the first harvest arrives, notice which ingredients you actually use. A beautiful crop that remains untouched may not deserve as much room next season as an herb you reach for several times a week. Productivity is personal. The most valuable edible wall is not the one with the longest plant list. It is the one that produces food your household enjoys while remaining simple enough to water, inspect, and renew. If this wall begins with only lettuce, chives, parsley, and one strawberry plant, it is still a real garden. Learn how those 4 respond, then add arugula for stronger flavor, tatsoi for a different shape, or a deeper gutter for radishes. Growth can happen in the design as well as in the plants. Beginning modestly gives you room to become more ambitious without turning the project into a burden. Share which crop you would place in the first pocket and keep following for more practical ways to grow fresh food in balconies, patios, and other small spaces. Start with the wall you have, choose the crops that fit it, and let every pocket earn its place.